the good boy. So, couple of things on this. This wasn't going to be long. It wasn't meant to be long. It's just um, I can recall a couple of brief stories about this particular video. One of those stories involves me uh, being at a hotel and being a little bit too open with my past, open with my thoughts on things. Abby just kind of undercut it. The average person is right. Average person is it's not really trustworthy. You can't trust the average person. You can't interact with them as if they're your family, because if you're in the workforce, they're not your family, they're your enemy. Even if they're your colleague, they're your enemy. That's the reality, right? So the good boy paradigm comes from um, it comes from several things. This was actually one of the original topics I talked about on my channel. But the good boy archetype, it comes from boys who were raised by their mothers, and unfortunately, this paradigm is kind of running rampant nowadays because a lot of the people who end up growing up in this paradigm are kind of lost to the wind. So it's more simple than it sounds. I know you got a lot of guys out there, whether they're white or black, and they had a mother and they were raised to think that their mother was just this very nice, good creature that they should put on a pedestal and worship, never question, never get angry at, never see them as a flawed human being. That yes, they're a loving, yes, they might be your mother, or even now this could actually pertain to fathers as well, but the reason why I'm focusing on mothers for the sake of this conversation is because it's kind of the only one I can speak to. I didn't grow up with a father. I grew up with a mother. She was a bit overbearing, very controlling, um, very manipulative. She used like a lot of abandonment, fear of abandonment, and all kinds of stuff. That kind of messed me up growing up. And wise, I wouldn't have a home. I wouldn't have a home. I wouldn't have a place to stay. I wouldn't have, yeah. Why am I saying this? Reason why I'm saying this is because in the modern day, today, being good is seen as, or when you're growing up with your mother, being good is like you get a little reward, like, oh, you're a good boy, but then she looks at you wrong. Maybe there's like some cue that she's trained you to do when you're young, right? And you just follow along with it. Um, a lot of men figure this out late that it's happening, and it kind of causes them to be further emasculated. Um, I got an opinion on emasculation now. It's surprised. I'm surprised I have this opinion. It's a little different. It's going to be a lot for a lot of people. So we're here to stories about people who are I don't know if I can say the M word. People who have something happen to them either from a neighbor or from a family member or something like that. Um, this is obviously a sensitive subject, but I'm starting to realize that emasculation and the M word, you know, doing something you're not supposed to do, inappropriate with a young person, is it's not it's not really all that far from each other. Um, Women kind of naturally emasculate men, and they do it, and they don't really think much of it. Um, Now, there are kind of two responses that there's there's several different responses that a man can have from emasculation. Which the reason why I'm bringing up emasculation is because it's one of the central conversation points of of our time, in my opinion, because it's one of the most prominent forms of emotional abuse that kind of goes untalked about, untouched. Um, it's also very dangerous. Um, there's some men that if you emasculate them, they'll actually harm you physically, right? Um, now, a lot of guys have been raised by their mothers, so when they get emasculated, they see it as something to, like, they're angry about it, yes, but they kind of sublimate that anger and it comes out in other ways. So the mom teaches the boy to essentially, it's like a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing. Like she teaches the boy to kind of be okay with the fact that he's being emasculated. So the boundaries that he would derive naturally from, like, raising his voice, being angry, or stuff like that, all of those methods of surmounting that kind of uh, abuse is kind of thwarted in a sense. The good boy archetype is very dangerous. I think there's a lot of men nowadays who, myself included, I have a hard time, just being honest with you. I have a hard time attracting women simply because they can read that I have a lot of respect for my mother. But it's not necessarily just respect, it's just that there's kind of a, it's kind of like a sliding scale, right? Like as much as as much as we love our mothers, a lot of times they teach us, they don't really, not really honest about the nature of women, about the nature of life. Um, and so this causes a lot of resentment, pain, and suffering. And the suffering happens in silence, right? You don't really get to air it, you don't get to voice it. Um, a lot of the conversations I've had with either my female relatives or just random chicks, um, it never really went anywhere. Once they got in their feelings, there was just nothing that could be spoken about. And so a lot of times you can end up feeling alone, like you can't talk to anyone about it. And if you talk about it to guys, of course, you got the guys that put up the front, like nothing penetrates them, right? Which is fine, but it's like you're doing this in front of a guy. It's like, come on, man, we know the deal. We know what you're really doing. You're not fooling anyone. So here's a couple ideas on what I think how to counter the good boy archetype. One thing I've learned is there's part of the good boy archetype is the fear of abandonment, right? So maybe you grew up with a mom, and whenever you got in trouble, she would threaten to not to get rid of you, just often, right? Not something that's done like casually for fun, like it actually kind of messes with you a little bit, right? Um, a couple of other things. Maybe you were emasculated so much when you were young by your mother that it kind of got to the point where you're psychologically castrated, and whenever you go out and and you try to talk up women, or you're in a position to speak to people, maybe someone's like doing something that you don't agree with. Um, what'll happen is the way you'll know that a man is psychologically castrated is that you'll see him in a position where he's compromised and he can't. Um, he doesn't defend himself. He doesn't stand up for himself. Whether it's a woman, whether it's another man, he just kind of like sublimates the anger. He learned to sublimate his anger with his mother, and so instead of voicing his, actually saying what he wants to say and expressing himself, expressing his boundaries, um, this is something that I think is it's sad, right? Because part of the growth of the boy to manhood is that he has to defy his mother. He has to defy his mother, and he has to mount a defense against his mother because his mother, a lot of times, is just naturally abusive emotionally. She naturally emasculates him and tries to make him as feminine as possible because she doesn't want to be overtaken by the boy's natural masculine energy. So it's kind of a messed up thing. Um, but these are two things that I've noticed that have helped me detach and separate from that mother kind of like, what do you call it? Um, to the best of my ability, right? Like I still respect my mother to a degree, but there is an essence. I've noticed. I've noticed there's kind of a connection between my relationship with my mother and how I relate with other women, and it makes it extremely difficult to actually attract them. I think it's actually easier to attract them when I'm away from my mother. Being around my mother has this kind of it's kind of emasculating, but I don't know exactly how to describe it. I think this is a lot of the issue. You have guys who are living with their parents, and maybe they're living with their mom or their dad or both. And I think this has an impact on your energy, if I'm being honest. If a woman's living with her family, like it's not really going to impact anything, in my opinion. Like she's still going to be able to attract men. She's still going to be able to get a job and all that stuff. It's not going to cause any issues really. But for us, I think our masculine development is so much more sensitive and it's harder to actually get to. Um, it's not necessarily guaranteed. It's something that has to be sharpened constantly. Um, so, a couple of things I think is important when it comes to actually getting out of that good boy archetype, that castrated version of yourself. So, learning to say no to people immediately and expressing that no without any extra added comments or words and things like that. The second thing is writing down. So, the second thing you can do is write down boundaries. And this actually works. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're a boy or a man or a woman. This is you can you can write down your boundaries because this is largely for codependence. Um, my experience is being raised as a codependent, so um, you can write down boundaries and keep it simple, right? So have like maybe four, maybe 3 to 4 things that are important to you. Um, and make sure you're very straightforward with this so that you honor yourself. It's gonna pay. It's gonna work very well for you in the long term, especially if you're on a job, because then you're gonna see it's gonna start emerging more and more, and your boundaries are gonna start getting stronger and stronger. But you have to start being okay with saying no, and you have to start being okay with no longer communicating with someone. I think this is probably prominent with um, what with people who have abandonment issues, codependence. Whenever we get rejected, we want to reach out to the person who rejected us, whether they ghosted you or whatever it is. Right? You have to learn. This is what I learned. I might make a video on that one actually. I'll make a video on that one. So, in essence, the good boy archetype is essentially psychological castration. Um, it's pretty easy to see. Women can actually naturally see it. So in order to actually fight against it, like if you're trying to attract a woman, you kind of have to be extremely aggressive, either just with your eyes, or you have to just treat her as badly as you can without her walking away. Um, I don't know. I'm not saying this is a good thing, and I don't really know how to counter it, but psychological castration is extremely bad, and it happens quite often. And in my opinion, if it starts from an early age, it can be so embedded in a person that it can stop the person from wanting to actually exist. Um, there's some things I could say, but I'm not going to say it for the purposes of this. It's important to understand that, especially if you're a man watching my channel. If you're a man watching my channel, here's the thing about life, right? It's really short. The world already doesn't really like you all that much. Um, so at the end of the day, you shouldn't be worried about what you're saying and how other people are taking it. So the good boy thing is, another part of it is, don't worry about how people perceive what you're saying and how they perceive what you're doing. You got that from trying to please your mother, but if you realize you can't really please her anyway. You could never please her. So once you accept that you can't please her, that she's just a normal human being, she has flaws like everyone else. Her life. Here's the other thing, right? Like, I understand sometimes women's lives are hard and stuff, but their lives aren't harder than yours. That's also bullshit. Her life isn't harder than yours. So your mom's life, I know this is a reality twist, right? So her life wasn't harder than yours. Meaning, here's the meaning behind why I say that. Your life has meaning. Your struggles have meaning. The things that you've gone through in your life, they have meaning. And when people tell you that they've gone through stuff and they've dealt with more stuff, it's kind of a guilt trippy way of like basically destroying yourself, your sense of self, and the importance of your own life, right? Remember this as well. You're still alive and everything, and you're trying to go throughout life and make things work out for the good, for the better. You could get hit by a bus tomorrow. You could fall out of a car. You could get in a car wreck and die. All kinds of bad stuff can happen, right? So sometimes when you go out and you try to make the biggest splash in the world, just tell yourself, hey, this could be the day I die. Um, it's a it's a reality switcher, right? Because maybe if you think that way sometimes, then you'll do what you intended to do from the beginning. If you know, okay, well, this is the last day, or if you at least perceive that, hey, greater sense of importance of actually doing things to the best of your ability. If you want to break the good boy archetype, there's several different things you can do, and I'll kind of just leave it at this. Understand that the people around you are just as imperfect and just as broken as you are. The other thing, your feelings, the boundaries you set, those matter. The parts of you that you want to protect and you want to defend, you have to tell people no when they press against that. You can't just let them get stuff. Now, it doesn't matter how manipulative they are. You have to bring whatever they're doing to the surface and be matter of fact. Third thing is proximity. The closer you are to a mother, if she is that kind of mother that's kind of like this malevolent mother, right? Where they're so manipulative, they don't even realize that they're psychologically castrating you or causing harm to you, or mentally just kind of. Um, and it's not just moms, right? This is behavior. You see this kind of behavior with narcissists, and that you see that with male narcissists, female narcissists. See it with people with personality disorders, whether they have a narcissistic personality disorder or a bipolar personality disorder or a borderline personality disorder, which is that's definitely a fucking trip if you have to deal with that. So obviously, this is quite a topic, um, but this is probably something I'm going to talk about a little more in the future. The good boy.